Good evening, class. In today's short presentation, I will be discussing the importance of deforestation. Perhaps most of you already know that deforestation is an issue. If not, within this presentation, I will be discussing why should all be aware of this phenomenon. If there's one thing that I would believe has been the biggest factor to deforestation, it will be globalization. The reason is because ever since the Industrial Revolution happened, more demand for factories and technology has been requested. Despite that the Industrial Revolution has brought many goods, it has as well caused many deaths. Since all the industrializers want to build more and more land, that requires for them to cut down trees or burn them. Even if it is restricted and conserved area, people will use fake data and documents to say they can construct in the area. As a matter of fact, there was an investigation by Greenpeace that were accusing companies from Germany, Portugal, Belgium, and United States of illegally obtaining the title to about 37 million acres of land of the Congolese rainforest. Within the research, my forecast would be I can convince you all that we need to make the international leaders understand the consequence of these actions. As my case study, I have chosen China and its fish industry. But before we go into China, let me tell you what deforestation is in general and its causes and effects. Why is deforestation a threat to environmental security? Environmental security encompasses the interactive dynamics of the diverse human and natural network that constitute the modern world. Furthermore, environment as a resource has strategic significance for nation-states who build power through natural resources such as water, oil, gas, and various other minerals. In the case of deforestation, environmental security is at risk because without trees, nations will be more vulnerable to natural disasters, and it will be much more harder for oxygen to get to humans. After all, we are all alive thanks to the oxygen that comes from trees. Now let's talk about the history of deforestation. The earliest evidence of plant and animal extinction go back some 4,000 years old. However, as the Industrial Revolution went on, deforestation took off in more developed countries. Logging operations became more productive since they provided woods and paper products. Some loggers act illegally in building roads to access more and more remote forests. Illegal logging exists because of increasing demand for timber, paper, and derivative products, including packaging. Economically speaking, the World Bank states that the annual global market loses 10 billion annually from illegal logging. So if we are speaking in social terms, illegal logging threatens some of the world's most valuable forests. Despite the many effects that deforestation causes to the environment, right now I'm actually going to make a few reasons why it's supposed to be a good thing for deforestation to happen to the planet. One of the reasons is to make more land available for housing and urbanization. The other reason is to harvest timber to create ingredients that are highly priced consumer items. And the other reason would be to create room for cattle ranching. These three parts are one of the reasons why deforestation for many people is still considered a good idea. On the other hand, now that I'm going to go in detail how it actually destroys the environment more than it benefits, I'm going to say one of the reasons, and one of those are that deforestation leads to loss of habitat for millions of species. As a matter of fact, 80% of animals live in the forest, so therefore, with loss of forest, we won't have much of animals to look into when we go into savannas. Another thing that also you need to look into is the fact that fewer forests means larger amount of greenhouse gases enter the atmosphere. In other words, we will have more vulnerability for us to actually get more greenhouses, which will cause climate change to actually get much dangerous, and then climate change will get worse. Now let's talk about how does deforestation affect the international community. Being that we all depend on oxygen to survive, then if deforestation continues, we might also prepare for the extinction of every being in this planet. On top of that, many nations today depend on forests to survive. Therefore, my next question will also emphasize how has globalization been a threat to deforestation. To answer that, I will say that globalization has featured extensively in debate on environmentalists, and green activists have highlighted its far-reaching effects. In the case of China, we have seen drastically how pollution has been a big issue where now the people in China are more vulnerable to lung diseases. Also, globalization has led to an increase in the consumption of products. It has also impacted the ecological cycle. The other point to mention about the reason how globalization has been a threat to deforestation is because globalization has also led to an increase in the transportation of raw materials and food from one place to another. As a matter of fact, like as I mentioned, China happens to be one of the big importers of raw material all around the world. And then the last but not least The amount of fuel that is consumed in transporting these products has led to an increase in the pollution levels in the environment, and we can pretty much see how the effect of pollution has been very negative towards China. Deforestation is resulting in damage to the quality of the land. Today's forest covers about 30% of the world's land area, and yet a high percentage is lost each year. If it continues then, the world's rainforest could vanish in 100 years. In the case of China, the evidence shows how many of the forests have been already used for plantation purposes. Despite of their logging ban impact, and that due to that it has eliminated a significant source of domestic jobs and labor, China still continues doing illegal logging in other nations. As a matter of fact, China has become the leading importer, consumer, and exporter of the world's timber. The next point that I want to emphasize is the consequence of deforestation in China. Deforestation can affect in the sense that more natural disasters can occur. In the case of China, logging and resulting erosion in the Yangtze River basin and along other rivers are believed to have caused devastating floods, landslides, and mudslides that have killed thousands of people, washed away roads, and caused billions of dollars in damage. The next point that I want to talk about is the less protection from the sun. In other words, the more trees we have, the less chance we have of the land not getting warmer, since trees are used as shades and to make the earth stay cool. Also, the less natural resources. With deforestation happening, it means that we will not have enough natural resources such as water can produce negative effects in the nation. One of those effects can be loss of life, especially the people in China who are poor. How does deforestation affect the fish industry in China? Being that China has the largest fish industry in the world, this fish industry, for example, provides for 1/3 of the global production. It represents 60% of the global aquaculture production. The way how it affects China now more deeply, because China covers a total of 400 million people of natural grasslands. Therefore, grassland citizens or indigenous tribes depend very much that the Chinese government make an outstanding recovery. In many of these grasslands, there's a lot of water resources where many of the people, indigenous people that live there, they actually depend on that water and the fish living in there to actually survive. The increasing of the fish industry has become the victim of its own success. Overfishing has been a cause of rapid depletion of fish stocks in China's domestic waters. This domestic waters creates a serious threat to the sustainability of its marine fishery. Therefore, fishermen now have to depend on open water fish. One thing that China has actually done because of their previous experiences, because they have known that their economy was not doing so well, is their plan in restoring natural habitat. As mentioned, it is obvious that China has been within this crisis for a long time. Because of their loss and how it has affected its GDP, China has come up with a policy to restore their economy and environment. Their policy is known as the 2020 plan. This plan means that by 2020, main goal is to make stronger the economy through putting the environment first. What triggered this concern was the market collapse in 2015, in which it forced the government to devalue the yuan in August to an increase in capital flow. The government came with 4 policies. For the one that I will be explaining, it will be the third policy. The third policy stand for the 2020 plan is pillars of the proposal towards the application to the new normal. 5 development idea. In this policy, one of the 5 development ideas mentioned was to firmly maintain environmental friendly green growth. This proposal is a continuation of the 12 5-year plan of reducing targets for chemical oxygen demand, sulfur dioxide, ammonium nitrogen, and nitrate oxides. However, the Chinese government have in mind that ensuring such things like a good quality of the farmland and water resources is risky, since promising 100% effects are highly to happen. Again, this is a plan that they're actually expecting to be 100% effective, but then one thing that we have learned from this class is that nothing is 100% effective. So it's going to be risky to promise something and then at the end of the day, it's not going to be done perfectly. Now, with this in mind, the government has focused on the following measures in China. The first one is expansion of financial services for the green industry and the establishment of a fund for industries. The second one is the creation of national real-time environment monitoring system. And the third one is the introduction of an extremely strict water resources management system. Last but not least is the promotion of a plan to disseminate new energy vehicles. When it comes to the environment and us thinking why should we care so much about it, is that at the end of the day, this is all that we have for us to survive. If we don't protect the people that came before us, then what's the point of actually keep protecting and keep getting industrialized and keep getting globalized with the more things I have right now. In other words, if we tend to continue the way that we are right now with making everything globalized and having more companies and not actually thinking of what that is going to cost for the environment, the solution lies in developing effective mechanisms that can check the extent to which it can impact the environment. The survival of human race on this planet is dependent on the environment to such a large extent that we cannot afford to ignore the consequences of our own actions.